I had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital, yet not a single relative came to see me. A few days later, my mother texted me, "Why haven't you paid the bills?" She didn't care about my condition. All she worried about was the money. So I stopped covering her expenses altogether. Now that she finally understands what happened, she's in tears, begging, "I'm your mother. You can't do this to me." Look, I never thought I'd be that guy writing one of these posts. But here we are. Life has a funny way of teaching you lessons when you least expect it. And boy, did I learn mine the hard way. So let me set the scene. For the past 8 years, I've been the family ATM. And I don't mean that in some dramatic, exaggerated way. I literally mean I was the one keeping everyone afloat. My mom lived in my house, this modest 3-bedroom in the suburbs that I bought with my own money, paid the mortgage on every single month without fail. My sister rented a place about 15 minutes away, but somehow half her bills ended up on my credit card. And my brother? Don't even get me started on my brother. The guy was 32 years old and still hitting me up for loans that were never really loans because we both knew he wasn't paying them back. I handled everything manually. Every bill, every payment, every expense. I was on top of it. The mortgage, homeowner's insurance, utilities, internet, my brother's car payment because his credit was trashed, mom's medical bills, even the streaming services everyone used, but I was the only one paying for. I'm talking Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, the whole package. I had spreadsheets, reminders on my phone, automatic alerts. I was more organized than a Fortune 500 company's accounting department. Why did I do it? Honestly, I don't even know anymore. Maybe I thought that's what family does. Maybe I felt guilty because I was doing better financially than everyone else. I had a decent job in logistics management. Nothing fancy, but it paid well. And I guess somewhere along the way I convinced myself that taking care of everyone was just my responsibility. Looking back now, I realize I was being played, but at the time it felt normal. My typical day started at 6 in the morning. I'd get up, check my phone for any urgent family texts, and there were always urgent family texts. Make coffee, get ready for work. My commute was about 40 minutes, which gave me time to mentally prepare for whatever fires I need to put out that day. And I'm not just talking about work fires. I'm talking about my sister calling because her landlord was threatening to evict her again, or my brother needing $200 for some emergency that was never really an emergency. The requests were constant. My phone would buzz at work, during meetings, during lunch breaks. Mom needed help with a repair guy coming to fix the water heater. Sister's car broke down, and she needed an Uber to work. Brother lost his job again and needed grocery money. It was like being on call 24/7, except I wasn't getting paid for it. I was the one doing the paying. My coworkers noticed. They'd make comments about how I always looked tired, how I was constantly on my phone dealing with family stuff. My manager pulled me aside once and asked if everything was okay at home. I laughed it off, said it was just normal family things, nothing I couldn't handle. But the truth was, I was barely hanging on. The stress manifested in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. My shoulders were permanently tensed up, like I was bracing for impact all the time. I started getting these tension headaches that would last for days. I kept a bottle of ibuprofen in my desk drawer, another in my car, another in my bathroom. I was going through them like candy. My diet went downhill too. I grabbed fast food on the way home because I was too exhausted to cook. Burger King, Taco Bell, whatever drive-thru was convenient. I gained about 20 pounds over 2 years without really noticing. My clothes got tighter, but I just bought bigger sizes and kept going. There wasn't time to worry about my health when everyone else needed me to keep their lives running smoothly. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I'd lie in bed at night, running through mental checklists. Did I pay the electric bill? When was the car insurance due? How much was left in my checking account? Could I cover my brother's rent this month? The numbers would swirl in my head until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then my alarm would go off at 6, and I'd drag myself out of bed to do it all over again. My friends stopped inviting me places because I always said no. Who had time for happy hour when you're managing 3 households? Who could afford a weekend trip when you're covering everyone else's expenses? Eventually, the invitation stopped coming, and I told myself I didn't care. I had responsibilities. That's what being an adult meant. But my body was keeping score, even if I wasn't. Every skipped meal, every sleepless night, every tension headache I ignored. It was all adding up. I'd gone to my doctor for a routine checkup about 6 months before everything went down, and he looked concerned at my blood pressure reading. He asked about stress levels, suggested I might want to talk to someone, maybe consider some lifestyle changes. I nodded and agreed, and then went right back to my same routine, because what choice did I have? The thing is, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought being a good son, a good brother, meant sacrificing everything to keep everyone comfortable. My mom had raised me to believe family came first, always, no matter what, and I took that seriously. Maybe too seriously. Then came that Tuesday morning in October, just another regular day, or so I thought. I'd woken up feeling off, kind of lightheaded, a weird pressure in my chest, but I ignored it. I had a big meeting at work about a new warehouse contract, and I couldn't miss it. So I downed some coffee, popped a couple Tylenol for the headache I could feel building, and headed to the office. The meeting started at 9. We were maybe 20 minutes in, my boss droning on about efficiency metrics and cost projections, when this wave hit me. It started as that same dizziness from the morning, but suddenly it got way worse. The room started tilting. My chest felt like someone was tightening a vice around it. I couldn't catch my breath. I must have looked bad because my manager stopped mid-sentence and asked if I was okay. I tried to say yes, tried to play it off, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out right. The words were jumbled. My hands started shaking. I grabbed the edge of the conference table to steady myself, but my vision was getting blurry around the edges. That's when people started moving fast. Someone, I think it was Karen from accounting, helped me sit down on the floor. Someone else ran to get water. My manager was on her phone, and I heard her say the words that made everything real. She was calling 911. I remember thinking this was ridiculous, that I was fine, that I just needed a minute to collect myself. But my body wasn't listening to what my brain was trying to tell it. The chest pain was getting worse. My left arm felt weird, kind of tingly and heavy at the same time. I started wondering if this was actually a heart attack. I'm only 36, I thought. People my age don't have heart attacks. Except they do, don't they? Especially people who are stressed beyond belief and ignoring every warning sign their body sends. The paramedics arrived within maybe 10 minutes, though it felt like an hour. They came in with their equipment, asking me questions, taking my vitals, hooking me up to a portable EKG. The whole office was watching. Nothing quite like having a medical emergency in front of all your co-workers to make you feel exposed and vulnerable. They loaded me onto a stretcher and wheeled me out through the office. I caught glimpses of concerned faces, heard someone say they hoped I'd be okay. Then we were in the ambulance, and everything got very serious very fast. The paramedic in the back with me was monitoring machines, asking about my medical history, checking my responses. She had this calm, professional demeanor, but I could see the focus in her eyes. This wasn't routine. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and bumpy roads and medical jargon I didn't understand. They were communicating with the hospital, giving them information, preparing them for our arrival. I just lay there on the stretcher, staring at the ceiling of the ambulance, trying to process what was happening. My phone was in my pocket, buzzing with what I assumed were work messages, but I couldn't reach it, couldn't do anything except focus on breathing. When we got to the emergency room, they rushed me straight through. No waiting room, no paperwork, just straight into a trauma bay. Nurses surrounded me immediately, hooking me up to more machines, starting in 4, cutting off my shirt to attach monitor leads. A doctor appeared, young guy with tired eyes, asking rapid-fire questions about my symptoms, my medical history, any medications I was taking. They ran me through a battery of tests. Blood work, chest x-rays, EKG after EKG. Everyone was moving with purpose but not panic, which I took as either a good sign, or they were just really good at hiding concern. I lay there in that paper-thin hospital gown, fluorescent lights glaring down at me, listening to the beep of monitors and wondering how my normal Tuesday morning had turned into this. Eventually, a cardiologist came in. He introduced himself, looked at my charts, examined me. Then he explained what was happening. My heart was okay, no actual heart attack, which was a good news. But my body was shutting down from chronic, severe stress. He used terms like acute anxiety episode, nervous breakdown, cardiovascular strain. Basically, my body had finally said enough and forced me to stop. He told me they were admitting me for observation, at least a couple days, maybe longer. They needed to run more tests, get my blood pressure stabilized, make sure there wasn't any underlying damage. I nodded, barely processing it, because all I could think about was the bills due next week, the mortgage payment, my family. My mom was at home waiting for me. Someone needed to tell her where I was. As they wheeled me up to a room in the cardiac unit, hooked up to monitors and 4 bags, one thought kept running through my head. My family needed to know what was happening. They needed to know I was in the hospital, because surely when they found out, they'd come. They'd check on me. They'd care. After everything I'd done for them, they'd be there for me. That's what I thought, anyway. I had no idea what was actually about to happen. So there I was, lying in a hospital bed in the cardiac unit, hooked up to machines that beeped every few seconds, monitoring my every heartbeat. The room was quiet except for those beeps and occasional footsteps in the hallway outside. There was a plastic chair next to my bed, the kind that looks uncomfortable just by looking at it, and it stayed empty. I'd sent those texts when they first brought me up from ER. Quick messages to my mom, my sister, my brother. Nothing dramatic. Just letting them know I was in a hospital, that I'd had some kind of episode at work, that the doctors were running tests. I kept it simple because my hands were shaking and typing was hard to form my arm. The messages showed as delivered, then read. Both my sister and brother had read receipts on, so I could see exactly when they'd open my messages. My mom didn't have an iPhone, but I knew she checked her texts religiously. They'd all seen them. They just weren't responding. At first, I made excuses for them. Maybe they were at work and couldn't reply right away. Maybe they were so worried they were already on their way to the hospital and didn't want to text while driving. Maybe their phones died. Maybe there was some technical glitch. My brain went through every possible explanation that wasn't the obvious one. That first night dragged on forever. Nurses came in every couple hours to check vitals, adjust my floor, ask how I was feeling. The night shift nurse was nice. This older lady named Patricia, who reminded me of someone's grandmother. She'd chat with me for a few minutes each time, asking about my family, whether anyone was coming to visit. I told her they'd probably come tomorrow, that they were busy tonight. She smiled and nodded, but I caught this look in her eyes, like she'd heard that before and knew how it usually ended. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain would start racing. Not about my health, weirdly enough, but about all the bills and payments I was supposed to handle. My sister's electric bill was due in a few days. My brother's car payment was coming up. The list went on and on. Morning came, and my phone still showed nothing. No missed calls, no new texts, no concerned messages asking for updates. Just silence. The day shift nurse came in with breakfast, the sad little tray of scrambled eggs that looked like rubber and toast that could double as a weapon. I picked at it while staring at my phone, willing it to buzz. The cardiologist came by around 10 for rounds. He looked at my charts, asked about chest pain, checked my blood pressure. It was still high, but better than yesterday. He said if things continued improving, I might be able to go home in another day or two. Home, to the house I paid for, where my mom was living, probably wondering where I was, but apparently not worried enough to call. That's when something shifted in my brain. I was lying there, feeling sorry for myself, when this thought popped into my head. What if I just stopped paying their bills? My sister's utilities, my brother's car payment, all the extra stuff I covered for them. What if I let them experience what it was like when the money stopped flowing? Would they even notice me then, or would they only care about the money? The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. For 8 years, I'd been an invisible safety net. They took everything I provided completely for granted because it was always there, always handled, always taken care of. They never had to worry about where the money came from or whether their bills would get paid. It just happened, like magic, because I made it happen. But what if the magic stopped? What if they had to face real consequences for once? Maybe then they'd realize what they had. Maybe then they'd appreciate what I've been doing all these years. Or maybe, and this was a scary thought, they'd only care about the money and not about me at all. I spent the rest of that day thinking through the logistics. My sister's electric bill, I paid that directly from my account each month. My brother's car payment, same thing. The internet and cable at my sister's place. The insurance on my brother's car. Even the phone bills for both of them. All of it came out of my accounts with my manual authorization each month. By that evening, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to pay their bills anymore. Not my sister's utilities. Not my brother's car payment. Not any of the extras I'd been covering. My own mortgage and house bills? Those I'd keep paying. I wasn't stupid enough to risk my own home. But everything I did for them, that was done. Day 2 in the hospital was more the same. Tests, medications, bland food, nurses checking vitals. And still no word from my family. Not a single text, not a single call. That empty chair next to my bed was starting to feel like a symbol of my entire relationship with them. Present but unoccupied. There but not really. I started scrolling through old text messages during the long, boring hours. Months and months of conversations that were all basically the same. My brother asking for money. My sister complaining about bills. My mom sending me lists of things she needed help with. I'd scroll for minutes trying to find a conversation that wasn't about money or problems, and they were few and far between. There was one text chain for my birthday last year. My sister had sent a cake emoji and the words, "Happy Birthday." That was it. No card. No gift, no offer to take me out for dinner. Just an emoji. My brother had forgotten entirely. My mom had given me a card. I remembered that. But when I opened it, there was a note asking if I could help her with her property tax bill. The reality of my situation was becoming clearer with each passing hour. I wasn't a son or a brother to these people. I was a resource. A bank account with legs. An ATM that occasionally needed maintenance, but was otherwise expected to keep dispensing cash on demand. And the worst part? I'd let it happen. I'd trained them to treat me this way by always saying yes, always coming through, always putting their needs ahead of my own. On day 3, I was feeling physically better but emotionally worse. My blood pressure had stabilized, the chest pain was gone, and the doctors were talking about discharge the next day. But that empty chair next to my bed was eating at me. 3 full days in the hospital, and not one family member had bothered to visit or even call to check on me. I thought about reaching out to them, just to see what would happen. But something stopped me. Pride, maybe, or just exhaustion. I was tired of always being the one to make the effort, to reach out, to fix things. For once, I wanted them to step up. For once, I wanted to matter to them as a person, not just as a source of money. The hospital social worker stopped by that afternoon. Nice woman, probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and a clipboard. She asked about my support system at home, whether I had family who could help during my recovery. I almost laughed. Support system? I was the support system. But I just told her I'd be fine, that I had people who could help if needed. It wasn't technically a lie since I had people. They just wouldn't actually help. That night, lying in the dark listening to the machines beep and the muffled sounds of the hospital around me, I made a commitment to myself. When I got out of here, things were going to change. I wasn't going back to being the family ATM. I wasn't going to keep sacrificing my health and happiness to fund everyone else's lives. They could figure things out on their own for once. Their bills would go unpaid. The automatic safety net for them would disappear. And I would wait to see what happened. Part of me hoped they'd surprise me, that they'd show some concern for my well-being independent of what I could do for them financially. But a bigger part of me already knew the truth. I knew exactly what was going to happen when those bills didn't get paid. The next morning, the cardiologist gave me the good news. I could go home. My vitals were stable, My tests had come back okay, and while I needed to make some serious lifestyle changes and follow up with my primary care doctor, I was medically cleared to leave. A nurse came in with discharge papers and instructions about medications and warning signs to watch for. As I got dressed in the clothes I'd worn to work 3 days ago, they'd kept them in a plastic bag for me. I checked my phone one more time. Still nothing. 3 days in the hospital, and my family hadn't sent a single message asking how I was. That told me everything I needed to know. I took an Uber home because I wasn't clear to drive yet, and there was nobody to pick me up anyway. The driver tried to make small talk, but I wasn't in the mood. I just watched the familiar streets pass by, thinking about what came next. My phone was in my hand. Notifications turned on, volume up. Their bills would start coming due in the next few days. Let's see how long it took for someone to notice. When I walked into my house, it was quiet, too quiet. My mom wasn't there. I checked the kitchen, her bedroom, even looked in the backyard. Nothing. Then I saw a note on the kitchen counter, in her handwriting. She'd gone on a 2-week trip to Vegas with her friends. Be back in 2 weeks. That was it. No mention of me being in the hospital. No asking if I was okay. Just a casual note like any other week. I stood there holding that note, feeling something crack inside me. I'd been in the hospital for 3 days with heart problems, and she'd used that time to start a 2-week vacation in Vegas. She hadn't even bothered to cancel her trip or check on me. The house I paid for, the comfortable life I provided, she just left it all to go have fun while I was hooked up to monitors. I went to my room, sat on my bed, and stared at my phone. Any minute now, I thought. Any minute the bills would start coming due, and they'd realize something was wrong. My brother's car payment was due in 2 days. My sister's electric bill right after that. Those would be the first dominoes to fall. And when they did, I'd finally get to see what my family really cared about. The silence in my empty home was deafening, but it was also clarifying. For the first time in years, I could see my situation clearly, and I didn't like what I saw. It took exactly 4 days. 4 days for someone in my family to reach out, and when they finally did, it wasn't to ask how I was feeling. It was about money. Of course it was about money. My phone rang on a Saturday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee, still feeling weak from the hospital stay. The caller ID showed my mom's number. For a split second, I felt hope. Maybe she'd finally realized I'd been gone. Maybe she was calling to check on me. I answered, and didn't even get a full hello out before she launched in. Her voice was stressed, slightly accusatory. She'd been going through some mail and noticed a few bills hadn't been paid. Small things I'd been handling for her. Her phone bill, a subscription service, her car insurance. Why hadn't these been taken care of? Was something wrong with my accounts? Her questions came one after another, barely giving me space to respond. Not once did she ask where I'd been for the past week. Not once did she ask if I was okay. Just confusion and mild irritation that her bills weren't magically paid like always. I took a sip of my coffee and told her calmly that I'd been in the hospital, 3 days in cardiac care. I'd texted everyone to let them know. There was silence on the other end, but not the concerned kind. More like the silence of someone recalculating their approach. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. She asked if I was feeling well enough now to get caught up on everything. Those bills were important. She said she couldn't let her insurance lapse. That was her response to finding out I'd been hospitalized with heart problems. When could I get back to paying her bills? I told her I wasn't sure, that I was still recovering, that maybe she should be more worried about my health than her phone bill. Her tone shifted immediately. Of course she was worried about me, she said, but life didn't stop just because someone was sick. Bills still needed to be paid. Responsibilities didn't just disappear. The audacity of it took my breath away. Responsibilities. I'd been responsible for 8 years straight, and the one time I physically couldn't be, she was lecturing me about responsibility. I told her I needed to go and hung up before she could guilt-trip me further. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down, not from weakness or medication, but from pure anger. That phone call told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't a son to her. I was a service provider who'd temporarily gone offline. Within 2 hours, my phone rang again. My sister this time. I debated not answering, but part of me was curious if she'd be any different. She wasn't. She was panicked, talking fast. The electric company had sent her a disconnect notice. They were going to shut off her power in 48 hours if the bill wasn't paid. She had food that would spoil. She needed electricity to charge her phone, to run her laptop for work. How was this happening? Why hadn't I paid it? I interrupted her spiral to tell her I'd been in the hospital. She stopped mid-sentence. There was a brief pause, and then she asked if I was okay now. Finally, someone asked, but before I could even answer, she followed up with whether that meant I could make the payment today to stop the disconnect. That's when it hit me. She didn't actually care about my well-being. She was just checking if I was functional enough to resume my role as her personal bank. I told her no, I wasn't making any payments right now. I needed to focus on my recovery. She started arguing immediately. Her voice got higher, more frantic. This wasn't fair, she said. She had bills. She had responsibilities. She couldn't just not have electricity. How was she supposed to manage? I'd always handled this before. Why was I suddenly being difficult? The lack of self-awareness was absolutely stunning. She had responsibilities. She had bills. What about the bills I'd been paying for her for years? What about my responsibility to my own health? But there was no point in arguing. I told her I had to go and ended the call. I sat there staring at my coffee, watching it get cold, feeling something shift inside me. 2 phone calls, 2 family members, and neither one had shown genuine concern for me. They'd both done the bare minimum, asked if I was okay, but only as a formality before getting to what they really cared about. The money. That evening, right as I was making dinner, my brother called. I almost didn't answer. I was exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day, but I picked up anyway, already knowing what was coming. He didn't even pretend to ease into it. The financing company had called him about his car payment. It was overdue and they were threatening repossession. He was angry, actually angry at me. How could I let this happen? Did I know how much he needed that car for work? What was he supposed to do if they took it? I interrupted his rant to tell him I'd been in the hospital. He paused, then asked what was wrong. I explained the whole thing. The collapse at work, the ambulance, 3 days in cardiac care being monitored for heart problems. He listened, or at least he was quiet on the other end. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said that was rough, but I still should have made the payment. There were apps for that, he said. I could have done it from my hospital bed. It would have taken 5 minutes. Now he was going to lose his car because I couldn't be bothered to spend 5 minutes on my phone. I actually laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind you make when something is so absurd your brain can't process it any other way. He genuinely thought I should have been managing his car payment while hooked up to heart monitors. He truly believed his car payment was more important than my health crisis. I told him he was 32 years old, and maybe it was time he handled his own bills. He exploded, started yelling about how I was abandoning the family, how I'd always helped before, how I was being selfish now when people needed me. That word, selfish. I'd sacrificed my health, my savings, my entire life for years, and I was a selfish one. I hung up on him, just pressed the end call button mid-rant. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts. From him, from my sister, from my mom. All of them saying variations of the same thing. I needed to fix this. I needed to make the payments. I was letting everyone down. I read them all and felt something die inside me. That last little spark of hope I'd been holding on to, the idea that maybe they actually cared about me as a person, it just evaporated. They'd show me exactly who they were and what I meant to them. I was a wallet, a resource to be tapped. Nothing more. Over the next few hours, the messages kept coming. My sister sent long paragraphs about how scared she was, how she didn't know how to handle bills on her own, how she'd always depended on me. My brother sent short, angry texts calling me names I won't repeat here. My mom sent carefully crafted guilt trips about family obligations, about how she'd raised me better than this, about disappointing her. I read every single one, and with each message, I felt more certain about my decision. This had to stop. not just for a few days or weeks, but permanently. I couldn't keep being their personal ATM while they gave nothing back except demands and entitlement. That night, I sat down at my laptop and made a detailed list. Every bill I'd been paying for each of them, every expense I'd covered. I went back through my bank statements for the past year and added it all up. The total made me physically sick. Over $70,000 in 12 months. $70,000 I'd given them while getting nothing in return except stress that literally put me in the hospital. I looked at that number and made a decision, not out of anger, though I was furious, not out of spite, though part of me wanted them to suffer. I made it out of pure self-preservation. If I kept doing this, I'd end up back in a hospital, or worse. Their bills would stay unpaid. All of them. They could figure out their own lives for once. They were all adults. My brother was 32, my sister was 29, my mom was only 63, and perfectly capable of managing her own finances. They'd been choosing not to because I'd made it too easy for them. Well, easy time was over. I knew what would happen next. The calls would intensify. The guilt trips would get worse. Extended family would get involved. I'd be painted as a villain, the ungrateful son and brother who abandoned his family in their time of need. Let them talk. I was done caring what they thought. My phone buzzed again with another text, this time from my mom, saying we needed to talk in person, that this was too important to handle over the phone. I turned my phone face down on the table and went to bed. Tomorrow I'd start making real changes. I'd change my passwords, lock down my accounts, maybe even talk to a lawyer about protecting my finances. But tonight, I was asleep without worrying about anyone else's bills for the first time in 8 years. My chest didn't hurt. My head didn't ache. My shoulders weren't tense. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I could actually breathe. And you know what? It felt amazing. The doctor cleared me to go back to work after 2 weeks, but I took an extra week off just for myself. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out my next steps. The demanding calls and texts from my family had slowed down after I stopped responding entirely. They'd figured out I wasn't budging. During that time off, I started going through my finances more carefully. I wanted to see exactly how much damage had been done over the years, what my actual financial situation looked like without the constant drain of supporting 3 other adults. I logged into my bank account, my savings account, my investment accounts. That's when my world stopped. My savings account, the one I'd been building for years as an emergency fund and future security, was almost empty. I had $48,000 in there 3 weeks ago. Now, there was $2,312. I stared at the screen, refreshing it multiple times thinking it was an error, some kind of glitch. But the numbers didn't change. $45,700 had vanished from my account. I checked the transaction history, my hands shaking so bad I could barely work the mouse. There were 3 large withdrawals, one for $25,000, one for $15,000, and one for $5,700. All of them had happened while I was in the hospital and during the week after. All of them were marked as transfers, not purchases. Someone had moved my money. My first thought was fraud. Someone had hacked my account. But as I dug deeper into the details, I saw that the transfers had been authorized using my security questions, the ones only family members would know the answers to, because I'd stupidly used family information, my mom's maiden name, the street I grew up on, my first pet's name. I felt sick, not the chest pain sick from before, but nauseated, betrayed, violated sick. One of them had accessed my account, maybe all of them. While I was in the hospital fighting to get my health back, they'd been stealing from me. And now I knew where my mom had gotten the money for her Vegas trip. I grabbed my phone and called my bank immediately. The representative was helpful, but the news wasn't good. The transfers had been properly authorized with all the right security information. From the bank's perspective, they were legitimate. I'd need to file a police report for fraud if I wanted to dispute them. A police report against my own family. The thought made me feel hollow inside, but what choice did I have? They'd stolen nearly $50,000 from me. That wasn't misunderstanding or family disagreement. That was theft. Before I called the police, I needed to know the full story. I needed to confront them. I texted my mom and told her to get my sister and brother over to the house. We needed to talk. Within an hour, they all showed up, and I could tell from their faces they knew what this was about. We sat in my living room, me in one chair, the two of them on the couch, looking like kids called the principal's office. I asked them directly, where was my money? Who took it? The silence was heavy until my brother finally spoke up. He admitted he'd taken $25,000, said he'd found my banking information on my desk when he'd stopped by to check on the house while I was in the hospital. He'd invested it in cryptocurrency, some new coin that was supposed to explode in value. He thought he'd make enough money to pay me back double and keep the profit for himself. Except the coin tanked and the money was gone. I sat there in stunned silence as he explained this like it was a reasonable thing to do. He'd stolen $25,000 to gamble on crypto and somehow thought this was okay because he intended to make money. The lack of logic, the entitlement, the sheer stupidity of it was breathtaking. Then my sister admitted she'd taken $15,000. She'd been behind on rent for months, owed money to friends, had credit card debt piling up. She saw an opportunity and took it. At least she was honest about it being theft, though she tried to justify it by saying I would have given it to her anyway if she'd asked. But I wouldn't have. That was the point. I wouldn't have given her $15,000 to bail her out of problems she created. And she knew that, which is why she stole it instead of asking. I asked about the third withdrawal. $5,700. They both went quiet. My brother finally said Mom had taken that one. She'd found my information, too. Apparently, they'd all worked together or at least knew about each other. She'd taken it right before her Vegas trip. I felt my blood pressure spike. The Vegas trip. The 2-week vacation she was currently on while I dealt with this nightmare. She'd stolen my money to fund her gambling and partying. My sister tried to defend her, saying Mom had already planned the trip and couldn't cancel. But that made it worse, not better. She'd chosen a vacation over checking on her hospitalized son. At that moment, I heard keys in the front door. My mom walked in, pulling a suitcase behind her, wearing sunglasses and looking tan. She'd come back early. She stopped when she saw all of us sitting there, and the smile dropped from her face. She knew. I asked her directly, where did the $5,700 go? She set down her suitcase slowly, took off her sunglasses. She tried to say it was for household expenses, but I cut her off. I knew about Vegas. I knew she'd taken my money for her vacation while I was in the hospital. She got defensive immediately, said she'd already paid for the trip a month ago and couldn't get a refund, except that was a lie and we both knew it. The withdrawal happened the day after I went to the hospital. She'd stolen my money to fund a 2-week gambling and partying trip with her friends while her son recovered from a cardiac emergency. She tried to justify it, saying she'd been stressed, she needed the break, she deserved to have some fun after all she'd done for me. That last part made me laugh bitterly. All she'd done for me? I'd been funding her entire life for 8 years. I asked her if she understood what she'd done, if she realized she'd stolen from her hospitalized son to go party in Vegas. She got angry then, said I was being dramatic. It was just money, she said. Family should share. I made good money and could rebuild my savings. She deserved to enjoy her life after raising me all those years. The entitlement was staggering. The three of them sat there looking at me like they expected understanding or forgiveness. My brother actually said he thought I'd be happy about the crypto investment idea, that I'd want to be part of something that could make us all rich. My sister cried and said she'd been desperate. My mom said family was supposed to help each other, and she needed that vacation to de-stress from her hard life. Her hard life, the one I funded completely. The house she lived in rent-free, the bills I paid, the comfortable existence I provided while working myself into a hospital bed. But here's the thing. Help means asking and receiving permission. What they did wasn't help. It was theft. They'd stolen my security, my future, my emergency fund. The money I'd saved by skipping vacations, driving an old car, living modestly. They'd taken it all without a second thought. And my mom had literally been partying in Vegas with my stolen money while I recovered from a health crisis. I told them I wanted the money back. All of it. My brother laughed bitterly and said he didn't have it. The crypto was worthless. My sister said she'd already spent most of it on bills. My mom said she'd spent hers too. So $48,000 was just gone, and they had nothing to show for it except a bunch of excuses. I asked them if they understood what they'd done, if they realized they'd stolen from someone who'd just been hospitalized, who'd spent years supporting them, who'd sacrificed everything to keep them comfortable. My brother said I was being dramatic. My sister said I made good money and could rebuild my savings. My mom said family didn't keep score. That last comment broke something in me. Family didn't keep score, but they'd been keeping score for years, hadn't they? Keeping track of every dollar they could squeeze out of me. They kept score of my usefulness while contributing nothing themselves. Now that I wanted accountability, suddenly family didn't keep score. I told them to leave. All three of them. Get out of my house. My brother argued that he didn't live there anyway. I clarified I meant my mom too. She had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. I was done. The reaction was immediate and explosive. My mom started crying, asking how I could do this to her. Where was she supposed to go? My sister called me heartless. My brother said I was being vindictive and cruel, but I didn't care anymore. They'd shown me who they were, and I was finally believing them. I told them I was filing a police report and pressing charges for theft. My brother's face went pale. My sister started hyperventilating. My mom begged me not to do this to my own family, but they'd already done it to themselves. They'd made their choices, and now they'd live with the consequences. After they left, I sat in the quiet house and called the police, filed a report for financial fraud and theft. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic, but realistic. Family theft cases were complicated. It might be hard to recover the money even if charges were filed. But at least there'd be a record, a paper trail, consequences. Then I called a lawyer, explained the situation. He said I had a solid case for civil court to recover the money, separate from any criminal charges. It would take time and money, but it was possible. He also helped me start eviction proceedings for my mom. 30 days notice, all legal and proper. Over the next few days, I changed every password, every security question, every account I had. I locked down my finances tighter than Fort Knox. I called my job and asked about direct deposit, going to a new account my family didn't know about. I was building walls, protecting myself, doing what I should have done years ago. The money was probably gone for good. The crypto was worthless. My sister and brother had no assets to seize, and my mom was living on Social Security. But this wasn't really about the money anymore. It was about drawing a line. It was about saying enough. It was about choosing myself for the first time in 8 years. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all weighing on the drama. Most of them took my family's side. Said I was being too harsh, that family should forgive. A few understood, said they'd seen this coming for years. I ignored all of them and focused on moving forward. The walls I was building weren't just financial. They were emotional too. Every boundary I'd let them cross, every manipulation I'd accepted, every guilt trip that had worked, I was shutting it all down. This was my life, my money, my future. And I wasn't sharing it anymore with people who only saw me as a resource to be exploited. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork. Phone calls with lawyers and police statements. The bank managed to flag the transactions as fraudulent, which started a formal investigation. My lawyer filed a civil suit against all three of them for the full amount plus damages. And the eviction notice was officially served to my mom. I thought cutting them off financially would be the hard part, but actually it was easy. One phone call to the bank, passwords changed, accounts locked down, done. What was harder was dealing with the emotional fallout and the constant pressure from everyone who thought they had a right to an opinion about my choices. My mom tried everything. First came the tears and guilt trips. Phone calls where she sobbed about how I was throwing her out on the street, how she'd raised me better than this, how disappointed my dead father would be. I let her calls go to voicemail. Then came the anger phase. where she left messages calling me selfish, ungrateful, a terrible son. Those went to voicemail too. My sister oscillated between apologizing and attacking. One day she'd text saying she was sorry and wanted to make things right. The next day she'd send messages about how I was destroying the family over money, how I'd always thought I was better than everyone else. I stopped reading them after the first few days. My brother went straight to threats. He was going to sue me. He was going to expose me on social media. He was going to tell everyone what a horrible person I was. I forwarded his threatening messages to my lawyer, who added them to our case file. Turns out threatening someone you're already being sued by for theft isn't a great legal strategy. The extended family drama was exhausting. My mom's sisters called me, crying and begging me to reconsider. Cousins posted vague Facebook statuses about family loyalty and forgiveness. My uncle left me a voicemail saying real men take care of their mothers no matter what. I blocked most of them and ignored the rest. But here's what nobody seemed to understand. This wasn't about the money. I mean, yes, $48,000 was a lot of money, and I wanted it back. But the real issue was what the theft represented. It was a final proof that I'd never been family to them. I'd been a resource they felt entitled to exploit. The eviction date approached, and my mom ramped up her efforts. She got her church involved, had the pastor call me about Christian forgiveness. She tried to claim tenants' rights, even though she'd never paid rent and wasn't on any lease. She told everyone who'd listened that I was making her homeless out of spite. What she didn't mention was that I'd offered her alternatives. I'd found her a decent apartment she could afford on her Social Security. I'd offered to pay first and last month's rent to help her get started. I'd even found her information about senior housing programs. She refused everything because it meant actually leaving my house and supporting herself. The day of the eviction arrived. I'd hired professional movers to pack her stuff and arrange for storage. I wanted this done properly, legally, no drama. She showed up with my sister and brother, all of them looking like they were attending a funeral. In a way, I guess they were. The funeral of their free ride. My mom cried as the movers loaded her belongings. Real tears, not manipulative ones. And for a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remember her taking $5,000 from my account while I was in the hospital, and the sympathy evaporated. She'd made her choices. My sister tried one last guilt trip, talking about family bonds and forgiveness. I pointed out that family bonds should have stopped her from stealing $15,000. She didn't have an answer for that. My brother just glared at me with hate in his eyes. Good. At least he was being honest about his feelings for once. As they loaded the last boxes, my mom turned to me and said I'd regret this. That blood was thicker than water, and someday I'd need family, and nobody would be there for me. I looked at her calmly and said family hadn't been there for me when I needed them most, so I'd learned to take care of myself. Besides, the full phrase was actually the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Chosen bonds over biological ones. She left without another word. My sister followed, crying dramatically. My brother paused at the door and said this wasn't over, which I guess was supposed to sound threatening, but just came off as pathetic. Then they were gone, and I was alone in my house for the first time in 8 years. The silence was incredible. No demands, no drama, no constant crisis require my attention and money. Just peace. I walked through the rooms, seeing my home without the weight of their presence. I could breathe again. Over the following months, things slowly resolved. The police investigation resulted in charges being filed, though the prosecutor warned me that family theft cases rarely went to trial. Most likely they'd take a plea deal. The civil suit was progressing, and my lawyer was optimistic about recovering at least some of the money through payment plans. My health improved dramatically. My blood pressure normalized. The tension headaches disappeared. I started sleeping through the night again. Turns out, when you're not constantly stressed about managing 3 other adults' lives, your body responds positively. Who knew? I also started therapy, which my doctor had recommended after the hospital stay. At first, I was skeptical, but it helped me process everything and understand how I'd gotten into that situation in the first place. The therapist helped me see the patterns, the manipulation, the ways I'd been conditioned to be the family caretaker since childhood. Work improved too. Without the constant distraction of family crises, I could focus on my job. I got a promotion within 3 months. The raise was modest, but it felt like a huge victory because it was mine. My money, my achievement, not something being drained away the moment I earned it. Some family members eventually came around. A couple cousins reached out privately to say they understood what I'd done and why. One of my mom's sisters admitted she'd seen the dynamic for years, but hadn't felt it was her place to say anything. Better late than never, I guess. But most of the family still thinks I'm the villain in this story. At Christmas, I wasn't invited to any family gatherings. My name is apparently mud at family events. I'm the cautionary tale they tell about what happens when you let money corrupt your values. The irony is painful, but also kind of funny. My mom found an apartment eventually, not the one I'd suggested. She tells everyone who'll listen that she's struggling, that her son abandoned her, that she raised me better than this. My sister and brother have their own apartments now too, somehow managing their own bills. Turns out they were capable of adulting all along. They just chose not to when they had me as a safety net. As for the money, I recovered about half through the civil suit. My brother's wages got garnished. My sister set up a payment plan. My mom was judgment-proof due to her limited income, but at least there was a legal record of what she'd done. It wasn't full justice, but it was something. The weirdest part of all this? I'm happier now than I've been in years. My life is my own again. My money is mine. My time is mine. My stress levels are manageable. I've started dating again, joined a gym, made new friends who actually care about me as a person. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty about cutting them off so completely. But then I remember that phone call from my mom, for days after my hospitalization, asking about the mortgage payment. I remember my brother saying I should have paid his car bill for my hospital bed. I remember finding my savings account drained. And I don't feel guilty anymore. Do I miss having a family? Sometimes. But I'm building my own family now, one based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation and exploitation. Friends who check on me when I'm sick. A girlfriend who thinks it's weird that my family treat me that way. Co-workers who become close friends. So that's my story. The family ATM who finally shut down for maintenance and never reopened. The son who chose his health over his mother's comfort. The brother who said no when everyone expected yes. I'm not proud of how things ended, but I'm not ashamed either. I survived, I'm healing, and I'm finally free. To everyone watching this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where family took advantage of you? How did you handle it? Was I too harsh, or did I do the right thing? Drop a comment below and let me know your perspective. If you found this story relatable or helpful, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means everything and helps me keep sharing these real-life stories. Thanks for listening, and remember, it's okay to put yourself first sometimes. Take care of yourselves out there.